There we are. We are live. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Coin Bureau Clips. Welcome back to NFA Live, Not Financial Advice Live. We were away last week. Apologies for that. I was in Amsterdam and it was all a bit difficult to get the stream going. But we are back this week and I am joined as ever by Rob from Digital Asset News. Rob, welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me back.
And of course, by Ben from Into the Cryptoverse. Welcome, Ben.
Hey, how's it going?
How are you guys doing?
Good as can be expected.
Yeah, under these conditions. So yes, this is going to follow the same format that everyone is used to. We have got 4 talking points that we're going to look through today that I'm going to pick Rob and Ben's brains on. If you guys have any questions that you would like to ask Rob, Ben, and God forbid myself, then please do leave them in the please do leave them in the comments, and we will try and get around to answering some of those at the end. And don't worry, we are not going to talk very much about Bitcoin ETFs today because they might get mentioned, but I don't think we're going to delve into them in any real detail because I think people have generally had enough of those for the time being, unless I'm reading the room very, very wrong. But anyway, let's kick off with now. This is something about global macro. Obviously, the last week and a bit have been pretty horrible. I've seen some pretty horrible news coming through from the Middle East. Now, my question regarding this is just the fact that do either of you guys feel that the events in the Middle East over the last sort of week and a half have they changed the global macro outlook from what it was, just prior to those events? Do you feel has anything really changed, been changed by what's happened, or do you think these events are, as tragic as they are kind of a piece with everything else that we've been seeing over the last few months and indeed the last kind of year and a half? Rob, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, so I think we all know that it has changed the landscape of what's happening and what could potentially happen. But the crazy thing about this is that as far as the geopolitical landscape, I'm not a geopolitical expert. And on my show, I made this very clear. I'm not going to delve too much into it because what really is the point? That's not what I do. And actually, there was this piece on on Saturday Night Live. It was a piece by Pete Davidson, and he came out and he did this monologue, and he goes, this is a horrible situation. He said, why would I be talking about this? He goes, because my dad was killed in 9/11. He goes, so I know a little bit about tragedy and the hazards that happen with everything that's going on in the landscape. And then he said something smart. He said, he goes, I can't change these things. I can't really talk too much about these things, but what I can do is I can do what I do best, which is comedy. So when we talk about these things, I know people will say, well, Rob, why don't you talk more about what's going on in Israel and what's happening with Palestine? I'm like, why? Am I going to change anything that's actually going on? I'm going to do what I do and try to keep a little bit of the sanity that's coming out, in the markets. I mean, if you want to follow all those things, there's tons of different places you can go to. I mean, for what we do on my show, and guys, you can just throw up that's my screen, is we just take a look at the markets itself. And of course, the landscape has changed, but we took a look about a week ago and talked about, everybody's worried about World War III that's happening. We saw the same thing with Ukraine back in February 2022. Didn't we say that that's the next big thing? And now, of course, Russia will come in, America will come in, China will come in, and we'll have World War III. And we took a look at as far as the markets because we can't control that part. The only thing we can control is our reaction to the events. And we said that, in all situations, as far as the market goes, we'll probably rebound. And then from that, we took a look at, just how volatile things happen with wars. We took a look at markets at war and the actual returns and the risk. And we can see that, again, the things that we can control is what we can invest into and how we deal with the markets itself. And then I hate to say this, but I mean, this is the truth that when we have these invasions and we have these economic uncertainty times, of course, it's going to change the macro landscape. these are the times to really get in. Now, again, people will say, Rob, why don't you, you talk about it. Look, again, I can't control it, but I will say that if you are this concerned about it, what's your job? What's your job? Your job is to take care of your family and the things that you can actually control. If this bothers you and you're like, well, I need to help out these people do something else, why don't you, and this is this is not financial advice, this is the whole show, but if you are saying to yourself, well, I need to control this for my family, then that is what you should do as far as investments. Later on, if you want to get into and say, well, I need to help those poor innocent people in the Middle East, well, it's a great thing that you actually invested and didn't stay on the sidelines. And then lastly, again, we took a look at if it was that bad and how the markets responded in World War II. We took a look at over time from 1941 moving forward. And we can see that, when Pearl Harbor was bombed in 1941, September, somewhere around there, we could see that, of course, the S&P 500, everything did go down, but we rebounded up. So again, even if we're on this World War III trajectory, this is what we have as far as the markets. Again, things have changed, but I can't control those.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. Ben, what's your take on this situation? Has anything really changed as far as you're concerned, or is this kind of just another piece of this sort of really, really difficult period that the world seems to be going through?
Yeah, it certainly is a difficult period. I mean, it's awful what's going on overseas, and you hate to see stuff like that happen. I mean, I'm certainly not a geopolitical expert, although there does seem to be a lot of them on Twitter. I will say, I think that, so at this point, the bond market has completely shrugged it off in terms of like having a significant impact on financial markets, right? The bond market has continued lower. Treasury yields have continued higher. And I think if the market had been extremely concerned about it, you might would have expected, the market might have thought that it would lead to a Fed pivot, right? It might lead back to QE. And the reason, again, is because like if we go into World War III, which hopefully that does not happen, but if we were to do something like that, then that would lead to a lot of money printing, right? When you look at the performance of the S&P 500 after the pandemic started, it's not even that dissimilar from the behavior we saw throughout the Second World War. And the reason is because while the thing that we were fighting, of course, was very different, there was a lot of money printing. That was sort of the cure, or at least the sort of the effect of both the pandemic and the World War. The Second World War was just to print a lot of money, right? And so the S&P, if you actually overlay, sort of this cycle with the one from 1946 to 1949, it actually looks very similar, in fact. So I think at this point, the market has sort of shrugged it off, because I think if the bond market, right, so bond investors, right, if those investors were overly concerned about it, I imagine that would lead to a Fed pivot and QE, which does not seem to be the case right now. It doesn't mean that it can't escalate into something like that, but at this point, it seems like the market has mostly shrugged it off.
Yeah. Sorry, Rob, go on.
No. I mean, Ben's right. I mean, we've shrugged it off, and we thought that, again, Ukraine was going to be the worst thing of all time. We thought this was going to be the worst thing. And there's so many different factors that play into it. It's very difficult. Now it's awful. I mean, Ben said it. We all know it's awful what's happening over there. But again, what can we do right now?
Yeah, very true. Very true. And I guess at times like this as well, the only thing, everything is so uncertain, and I guess that's what it throws into the mix more than anything else. And from a market's perspective, that's perhaps the most relevant thing, is that we're living through ever more uncertain times. Markets hate uncertainty almost more than anything else, I think it's fair to say. So what we've seen in the Middle East over the last couple of weeks or so has only added to that uncertainty. And I guess that does kind of cloud the picture in a way going forward. But it's it's certainly a difficult time to be in the markets. But I mean, let's get some perspective. It's a much more difficult time for people in the Middle East and many other places. So we should have that perspective.
Guy, could you just quickly throw my chart on the screen there, because I mentioned the Second World War, and basically this is like the S&P 500 performance, this sort of from the peak compared to coming out of World War II. So not a perfect match, right? None of the analogs are perfect matches, but you can kind of see how the market behaved for a few years, and it just didn't go anywhere, right? I mean, we had some nice rallies. We just didn't go anywhere. And then eventually we got far enough out where if you take what happened out, like you can see that the market went on a pretty crazy bull run once we more or less got inflation under control. But until that time, we sort of just hug this area for about 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Ben.
I like that.
Okay. Let's move on. Let's talk Bitcoin, shall we? This is something I've been wondering about. So this was kind of a little bit inspired by my trip to Amsterdam last week. It was the Bitcoin conference in Amsterdam. Pretty well attended, lots of interesting talks, lots of interesting people there. And of course, it being a Bitcoin conference, there were lots of opportunities to spend your Bitcoin on, things like vegan kebabs and various bits of merchandise, among others. But it got me thinking. I guess you guys, and probably most people watching as well, are familiar with Gresham's law, which is that bad money drives out good. Put simply, people will spend the less valuable money that they have, and this was formulated back in the days of gold and silver coins, and the quality of those would often get downgraded, coin clipping. So people would spend the bad coins first, the ones that had less quantities of precious metal in them, and generally hoard the better coins, the ones with more gold and silver in them. So my question is, would either of you guys, given that there are obviously lots of other cryptocurrencies and lots of other currencies in general available to us, do you guys think you will end up spending your Bitcoin, or do you see it more as a hold forever asset? And I guess the nearest analogy to that is gold, but there may be others as well. So Ben, starting with you, do you feel that Bitcoin has a future perhaps as a medium of exchange? And is it something that you would be open to the idea of using as a medium of exchange yourself?
I mean, yeah, I think it potentially has a future as a medium of exchange. I think the counterpoint is that a lot of people don't really like to spend their Bitcoin because, they assume it'll be worth more tomorrow than it is today. And, in economies, the way you encourage spending is by, making sure people know that the fiat they have is going to be worth less tomorrow than it is today, right? So like if you're pretty sure your money is going to be worth less tomorrow, then it encourages you to go spend it on goods and services. If you're buying Bitcoin because you think it's going to appreciate in value, you're not as likely going to want to go out and use it to pay for groceries or pay for anything, because you're going to be like, oh, well, if I just hold on to it for another 3 months, maybe I could buy 30% more groceries, right? So I think like I don't know how much I would like. I tend to just hold it, but at the same time, like holding forever can also be something that can be painful at times, right? So like if you watch it go up 30x, then it can be worthwhile sometimes to take, to bank some of that, right? Because we know the cyclical behavior of Bitcoin, like it goes parabolic every few years, and then it spends the next few years sort of bleeding and then going sideways, and so I think like occasionally taking profits does tend to work out, but I also think there's a case to be made that like always having some, no matter what, because you really don't know what's going to happen. I think that also makes some sense.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, one of Bitcoin's perhaps biggest value propositions is a hedge against future uncertainty, is a hedge against the failure of the fiat system in the future. So perhaps hodling for the long term is the best way to mitigate that. But Rob, what are your thoughts? I mean, for instance, Rob, just to expand the question a little bit, would you consider spending, using your Bitcoin to say buy other hard assets? And I mean, I guess the best examples that I can think of, other than perhaps gold, would be something like land or real estate. Or do you feel that are you sort of planning on hodling really for the foreseeable future?
This is not going to go over well with the Bitcoin maximalist, but yes, I will be taking Bitcoin, and I will, and we've talked about this in the show quite a bit. 80% of my crypto and alts will be sold when different indicators hit. And I use a couple different ones from looking at Bitcoin. I use a couple different ones from Ben's great website. And I will have to go from there. So I know people will say, well, why would you do that? It's because I've been here since 2017. I've heard the same narrative over and over again. Technology has to catch up with the underlying asset. I know Bitcoin people will say, well, it's going to be the next world reserve currency. It might be, but I've been hearing forever how it's going to $1 million. But we have to remember that may or may not happen, but it's going to take a lot of time. And then to get to your question, Guy, about like, can we use it for like just everyday transactions? If you could throw my screen real quick. I mean, if we take a look at, I don't know if I can see this. Oh yeah, this is the Bitcoin average transaction chart. And of course, back in the day, years and years ago, when people weren't using it too much, you could do that. But now you look at the average transaction. This was back in 2021, $62. Now people are screaming at the screen right now saying, but Rob, you don't understand because of the Lightning Network. Well, when Lightning Network comes in, fantastic. But you can overlay other stuff like XRP and Litecoin and God forbid, Bitcoin Cash. And you can see that, as far as like the fees go, I mean, there's much better options as far as like for small transactions. And if you take a look at the white paper, which I know, I hate to say this, but I know some of you have never seen this. You could just do a search for it for a white paper. It says very clearly, it's a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. And it's 9 pages, very easy to read. But that's not what I think is going to be used later on. And again, I think the technology has to catch up. And I always look at it like this. I always think it's like iron. All technology takes a while to move forward. So like iron, 5000 BC, it was just, we could use this for tools and shields and stuff like that. Then we figured out, well, if we put on carbon and iron, we can make steel, and we can make, skyscrapers and trains and actual buildings and things like that. So like when people talk about Bitcoin, as far as the technology, later on, it could be a store of value, but I don't know. And then just my last point is that, well, people will say, well, how can you get rid of it? Or how can you sell it and use it for other things? And it's because if I don't do it, other people will. And we tend to think and put these people on pedestals like a Peter Thiel. And when he was in 2022 for the Bitcoin conference, and he said how great Bitcoin was, and we're getting past that fiat standard, when in reality, what he did just months prior was sell pretty much all of his Bitcoin and crypto and digital assets and made a huge profit. So who did he dump on? He dumped on you. And when people talk about this, like, well, I'll never sell my crypto, just remember, or my Bitcoin. And some people won't even say that Bitcoin is crypto, but I mean, it's cryptography, but sure. I just want to remind people that as time goes on, you might want to take some profits along the way because the technology has to actually catch up.
Very true. Very true. And I guess we're kind of speaking from, a very privileged position in a way, because lots of Bitcoin holders, perhaps even the majority of Bitcoin holders, by number of people rather than by actual Bitcoin held, which is obviously, pretty concentrated. But perhaps the majority of people who hold some amount of Bitcoin in the world don't really have a choice. I mean, they have to spend it. I'm thinking people in places like Argentina or Lebanon or Zimbabwe or Nigeria or wherever, where not only have you got things like hyperinflation in play, and they need Bitcoin in order to preserve their purchasing power and to actually, and then they actually use it as a viable currency there. But yeah, they don't really have a choice. Whereas here are we do have a choice. And of course, we do have a choice in terms of other cryptocurrencies, don't we? This is something you touched on earlier, Rob. There are so many, and this was part of my thinking behind invoking Gresham's law as well. There are so many other cryptocurrencies. Stablecoins spring to mind if you want to, if you wanted to spend those, or then you've got things like Bitcoin Cash, which was, that was one of the whole reasons that came into being was because of this debate over, should it be a medium of exchange or a store of value or not? That's what Bitcoin Cash is designed much more to be medium of exchange. And then you've also got things like Litecoin as well, which has been, is officially the sort of silver to Bitcoin's gold. And again, is much more of a payment cryptocurrency, isn't it? But of course, that white paper was written back before any of these others came along. So it's it's perhaps not surprising that the rest of the sector has kind of gone in that direction, and Bitcoin's has become more and more about this store of value, which, as you say, the many Bitcoiners themselves are not all that happy about.
Yeah, I have to agree. It's just where's your risk tolerance? And of course, just to reiterate, I don't think you should sell everything. I think you should hold on to it. I think Ben spoke on this briefly, because who knows what could actually happen. I mean, it could be started put on the balance sheet of central banks. It could actually become legal tender in other countries besides El Salvador. So you never know. But I personally think that at some point you should take some profits, especially if you have massive debt or if you don't own certain things. I think it's one of those things you have to do. And that's what the white paper says it's for.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for what it's worth, I plan to hold on to the vast majority of my Bitcoin, but then, my time horizon, Rob, is perhaps, slightly longer than yours is. But of course, it all comes down to personal circumstance. And I certainly wouldn't have any objection in exchanging Bitcoin for another hard asset, as I mentioned earlier. I think there are other things, like, for instance, land or housing and stuff that that also have a lot of value, more so in different parts of the world, especially the part of the world where I'm from. So I certainly would always want to have some Bitcoin as a hedge against future uncertainty, if nothing else. But I certainly would spend some of it if or when the time was right. Okay, let's move on to the next question then. And now this is as close as we're going to get to Bitcoin ETFs. So don't worry, folks. But obviously, early this week, we had the kind of fake news spread that the Blackrock ETF had been approved. Everyone, myself included, got a bit overexcited and then had to, inhale vast amounts of copium when it all turned out to be fake news.
Copium. Nice.
Yeah, but then what I thought was particularly interesting was then the very next day, I think it was, Larry Fink of BlackRock popped up on Fox Business, I think it was, and was really, talking about Bitcoin in pretty glowing terms. Mm-hmm. He referred to, Bitcoin investing as a flight to quality, and he was talking also about the pent-up interest in crypto from BlackRock's clients all over the world. So my question to you, gentlemen, is: Do you buy what Larry is saying? Is he for real? Do you think that he really sees the value of Bitcoin, sees the potential for what it can do, or is he just shilling his book? Is he just talking up his ETF because he knows it's going to make him and BlackRock an absolute boatload of money? Ben, what do you think? Are you taking Larry as his word, or do you think he's more cynical?
Ben doesn't care.
I mean, I think, well, look, I mean, it could be both, right? Maybe he believes in Bitcoin, but I mean, look, he's selling a product at the end of the day.
Exactly.
And if you're selling a product, you're going to say whatever you can to get people, to sort of go buy that product. So I think that's more what it's about. Like, he has a product, he's trying to hype it up, he's trying to sell it. And that doesn't necessarily mean that he's like, against, like wouldn't be pro Bitcoin otherwise. But I also think that a lot of these people have really flip-flopped their views on Bitcoin just in over the span of a few years, just based simply on, now they figured out a way to monetize it. Therefore, now they're going to be bullish on it. Right.
Right.
So I think that you have to be careful with that stuff there. I mean, I think they are there to sell the product, and they will be there doing the same thing, whether Bitcoin goes up another 100% from here or whether it drops 50% from here, right? They're just going to try to sell their product no matter what. So that's my view. I don't really have any much more else about it. I don't really know, deep down what his desires and beliefs are, but on the surface, I think he's just selling a product.
Fair enough. Rob, what about
you?
I
wanted to hear Ben's response because I know he's like, I don't really care. But you know what what's great about what Ben said is he's right. And let me ask everybody in the audience right now, do you guys really care if Larry Fink is like, you know what, me and Michael Saylor, we had a great discussion and I'm totally on board? Nobody cares. Nobody cares if he believes it or not. They just want him to be in front of that camera talking about how great Bitcoin is and then get that ETF approved. Let's be honest. So like if he is or he isn't, doesn't matter. And if he's shilling, hey, he's shilling the products that we have. And that's pretty much what most people care about. Now, if it would come down to it, we'd much rather have somebody who is like really on board with it. But at the end of the day, if it leads to mass adoption, who cares? Let him shill his product and that's it. And I don't, do I think he believes in it? I think he believes that they're going to make a boatload of money on that ETF. And hopefully I'm wrong on that one. And it's looking pretty positive, honestly, but we'll see. I have no real opinion if he does or not. I mean, it's Blackrock, Blackheart, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, that's what Blackrock exists to do, isn't it? Make money for itself and its clients. Gosh, what a pair of grizzled, seen it all veterans you are. It's back not so long ago that the CEO of the world's largest asset manager talking in glowing terms about Bitcoin, and still today there'll be plenty of people getting really excited about it and calling it the start of a new bull market. Rob and Ben are just like, nah, don't care.
I mean, altcoins keep putting in new lows, so
this is true. There, done that, got the t-shirt. Okay, let's move on to our final to the final talking point I want to discuss today, and then after that we will take some audience questions, if indeed we do have any. So please do, as I say, please do leave your questions in the comments, and we'll try to answer some of them at the end. So my final question is, and this is moving a little bit away from crypto, but I think there's still a sort of relevance. So Bitcoin has long been touted, as Bitcoin fixes this. Bitcoin is the answer to the problem that is the world's financial system, and well, we will see. The jury is still out, but it's certainly the development it's seen and the development of the whole industry that it's inspired has been incredible over the last few years. But my question to you guys is, Rob, I'll go with you first on this one. If there was one problem and just one problem that you could fix, that you feel that humanity needs to fix in order to safeguard the future, what problem do you think that is? Leaving aside the question that the problem of the financial system that Bitcoin is going to fix eventually, what else do you think is the big challenge facing humanity and that we should perhaps focus on above all else?
Gosh, there's so many different problems we have, right? If it's just me and I think about it, I just have to work in the past for my experiences. And that is that, especially what's going on in the Middle East, is understanding and compassion and the realization that violence begets more violence and no one ever wins in wars. I remember I was in the Army for 8 years, and I served during Afghanistan war, and I was people know I was a medic, and I remember working in the burn unit, and I remember different soldiers that would come through, and different ones that's young guys, and they were burned beyond recognition, and some had lost limbs and things like that, and I would just take care of them. I have to go through a long, hard process. And I would just say that when I see all these young soldiers and just how badly they were damaged, it's a realization that, again, that the wars that we do and the problems that we have with humanity, no one ever wins in the long run. And it's just the people that pay the price are the people on the ground. So I think the big thing for realization is that I know we get all worked up and we really want to do these things, and we really have to say, well, that person's going to pay and that whatnot. But it really comes down to realization that nobody is ever going to win. And I think that's one of the bigger things moving forward. And there's so many other ones that we could talk about, but that's just my experiences.
Yeah. That's very profound, Rob, and I, for speaking from personal experience like that, you've seen firsthand what a shocking waste, war is. It's not just in terms of in monetary terms and destruction of countries and properties and stuff, but fundamentally it's just a waste of young people's lives. And young people, I think, are one of the if not the greatest resource that the planet has. And so to throw them away in a war is just the worst sort of waste.
Right.
Yeah, it's very true, very true. And there's the cynical view, isn't there, that that war begets sort of progress and things like that. And it's so difficult to square that with the actual reality that that people like you have seen. Ben, what problem? What is there? Is there a particular problem that you think humanity needs to fix, other than the one that Rob rightly brought up?
I mean, I think we do eventually need to become a multi-planet species so that we're not just dependent on the Earth, right? I mean,
true.
I mean, I guess it depends on how far out in the future you're talking about, right? I mean, eventually our sun will expand when it's dying and consume the Earth. So we got about a few billion years before that happens. But I mean, ideally, we need to focus on getting off this planet, I think, and expanding beyond. I mean, I know that seems like such a long ways away, right? You're talking about like hundreds, thousands of years away, but there's all sorts of bad things that could happen to a single planet, right? So if you don't have a single point failure, then it at least sort of ensures the survival of our species. I would say that we need to focus on that and figure out a way to expand and to colonize the solar system and beyond.
Yeah, before the planet goes in the toilet. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, Ben, that's a extremely long time horizon there. Thinking ahead into billions of years. I like it.
Someone has to.
Somebody's got to. That's why we have Elon Musk, so he can put all these things together for us.
I actually did an internship at NASA Johnson Space Center like back in undergrad. So I've been properly brainwashed into
See, these are the things that only Ben can talk about. We don't know these things. Great stuff.
Yeah.
Well, my poster is the Space Center poster.
Oh yeah.
Hey, I'm the only one qualified to say, to call for going to the moon, right?
I never noticed you had a picture behind there, because it's always your chair, which is in the chats right now, and it's always that door, which everybody thinks is where Peter Schiff lives. And then I didn't realize you had a picture. Interesting.
Yeah, we're going to the moon.
I've never seen it.
It's going to the Space Center, but you get the idea.
That's awesome.
We're not quite going to the moon yet, but we are on our way to the Space Center. That's a start, isn't it? That's a start. Well, it's interesting, yeah, because Ben, that's something that Elon Musk is very much concerned by, isn't it? I mean, you have to say Elon Musk seems to be concerned with solving quite a few problems. at the moment, but he's definitely talked about sort of making humanity a multi-planetary species. That seems to be pretty high up his agenda. And another one I noticed that he talks about a lot is global population decline, because this is something I put this question to some of the Coin Bureau team here earlier on today, and actually population decline was one of the ones that came up a couple of times. A couple of people were of the opinion that, you know, what with demographic decline and all the implications that has for the future, that is something that does need to be very urgently addressed. And I guess one of the benefits of addressing that problem is that it's a problem that's very easily solved. Getting humans to Mars, I think, is a pretty significant challenge. I think stopping humans from fighting each other like we've done for 10,000 years or however long we've been around is a pretty significant challenge, I think. Ones that, and it always amazes me. It's, we've been around for thousands of years, invented all these incredible things, achieved so much as a species, and yet we still still capable of not, just not getting along.
That,
yeah. Sorry, Rob, go on.
No, go ahead.
The one I was going to posit as a potential problem as a problem that I think needs solving is energy. I've been thinking a lot about this recently. Ben, I'd be interested as well to get your take on this, because you're someone with a nuclear physics background as well, I think. But I think if humanity can find a way to get unlimited, cheap and clean energy, I think we'd be able to solve a huge number, maybe not all, but certainly a very significant number of the problems that we're currently battling with. And I think if everyone on the planet had access to as much electricity as they needed, in a carbon neutral way, I think that would be. I think there'd be no stopping our development as a species and what we could achieve. But what do you guys think of that? Is that something that should be further down the list of priorities? Or
no, I always want to ask Ben about this, because he's got his PhD in nuclear engineering. I always was going to ask him, like, why aren't we more so in nuclear power, and we switched away from that?
So, well, there's the public opinion about nuclear, right? There has been a few accidents that occurred where, right, it got pretty bad press, but in fact, there's been a lot more deaths associated with other things like coal and stuff. It's just not as, there's not as many news articles about it. Nuclear is actually relatively clean. I think some of the you guys can stop me if you want, because I'll
No, I wanted to hear this for a long time. Yeah. So
basically, most of the reactors in the United States, or at least a lot of, there's pressurized water reactors, but there's the different ones. The main thing is most of them are uranium dioxide and zircaloy cladding. That's basically what we've been using for forever. There are other materials that are better, like that could be a lot better. And actually, for my graduate work, I actually looked into some of these, like silicon carbide and a few others for cladding, for cladding material. But the issue with nuclear is that there's the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC. Right. I actually had a fellowship through, like, they actually paid for a decent part of my grad school. But the issue is that it takes so like many years, decades of research to really get them to allow for new types of reactors or things that employ different materials. So it ends up being like we just keep using the same stuff because the alternative is to then experiment with all these other things that we don't necessarily know nearly as much about, right? We know a lot about uranium dioxide and zircaloy. We know a lot less about other types of fuel, whether it be like a molten salt reactor, whatever it is, right? I mean, there's all sorts. I'm not going to go into all of them, but the other thing is a lot of people talk about fusion. And fusion, I mean, if we can figure it out, if we can make it economically viable, then I think that it would actually, it would do what Guy was talking about. It would actually help a lot with making energy a lot cheaper, and allowing it, allowing other people to have access to it. Within nuclear, there's something known as an SMR, small modular reactor.
Mhm.
So the idea there is that you basically just put a little small reactor and you can ship it out. So like one of my fellow grad students, his entire PhD was around designing an SMR. And the idea is that you can ship it out to a relatively an area where it might be hard to get electricity to otherwise, and then they can just use that to get electricity. But the reason why fusion hasn't really taken off, I had a professor and he was in, I think, in his 70s or maybe even 80s, and his entire life he had done fusion work. And back when he was in grad school, like in his 20s, he was very excited about it, but you could see that his enthusiasm had dropped a lot over the years. And the saying basically is that fusion is always 20 years away, because it always seems like we're on the cusp of making a major breakthrough in fusion, but it continues to elude us. Now, I do think that they have made some progress recently in some of the experiments where they were actually able to finally get out more energy than they put in.
Right.
Which is a significant step, but it's still a long way to go for making it economically viable. But I mean, look, if we can solve our energy problems, like I was talking about, I mean, that solves a lot of issues. I mean, then you can really get into a phase of expansion. And I'm not like just talking about the stock market. Like I'm just saying, like in general, like if everyone has access to energy, it does solve a lot of issues, and then people can focus on more productive, doing more productive things, and then trying to figure out how are they going to, get electricity, or how are they going to get whatever. But I won't go on too much longer. But I do think nuclear will likely play a very vital role in our future. We haven't. I don't think we've fully embraced that view yet.
Yeah, I saw that report about fusion, how they actually did that, and they said, well, if we can do this, we can have energy in perpetual energy motion, and we can actually solve a lot of problems. And I thought to myself, that'd be great. And there was a report that came out and said that actually, if, from what it actually produced to the amount what it actually produced was an increase, but not like a vast increase. And this has been going on for like you said, like decades. If we do something like that, it'd be fantastic. But I mean, like how far away are we, Ben, from that? And then for like these small modular reactors that you talked about, because SMR sounds pretty like something that could really help out, not just like the rural areas in America, but the entire world. Is that like a thing that could actually happen?
Yeah, I think I was just making sure I wasn't muted. Yeah, I think it is. Again, there's just a lot of red tape that I mean, even like thorium-based reactors, right? I mean, there's a lot of reactor types that if you look into them, they seem like they're a lot better than what we're currently using. It's just good luck convincing the NRC to allow mass production of that. But once we can get past sort of like the stigma associated with nuclear, I think it opens a lot of doors. But I mean, there's been such a bad stigma associated with it for a long time that it kind of has kept us from expanding too much in that area.
Yeah, I saw this. There's a couple of videos out there about nuclear waste and how it gets people say, well, this is the downfall of nuclear reactors and how awful it is. But they said they've actually pretty much solved a lot of these problems already. The problem is, like you talked about, like these different reactors that melted down, and there was a bad press, and then people got away from it. And then we see these things happen in Europe. I think in Germany and France, they totally stepped away from it, and now they have a huge problem with energy and resources. This is just the things that I read. I'm not from there, but I always look at nuclear energy like, why didn't we do more research into it? Because at this point, we could be a lot farther along than just using coal and fossil fuels and everything else under the sun. I think it was just a big waste and a lost opportunity.
There's actually a cool story about how we found evidence that like a long time ago there was actually like a naturally occurring basically a naturally occurring reactor where essentially like it was producing energy. I won't go into it, but it was kind of cool. I'm like, well, how's that ever happened with any these all the other sources of
no way.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to be desired in nuclear. I mean, a lot we can make progress on there. We just have to be allowed to do it. And sometimes sometimes when I'm sitting here, like and I'm arguing with people on Twitter about the direction that the Ethereum Bitcoin ratio is going. I'm like literally like in 2021, like 2 years ago, I was like working at a national lab doing high energy density physics, and I'm like, what happened, Ben?
Yeah, exactly. Like I look back on my times in the Army, I was like, I helped more people, but now I'm doing this, and it's like, this is what it is. It's crazy.
The moment two crypto guys realize live on stream that they're wasting their lives.
Well, no. I'm not, guy. I will tell you one thing, and Ben does a really great job about this, is that he'll say, like, look, I mean, financially, if you just do these, not if you do these things, but if you just take a look at the data, Bitcoin dominance is going to go up. Everything's bleeding against it. If you just kind of wait and sit on the sidelines. And so far, Ben's been right about that one. I think that's helped a lot of people in the long run, as opposed to someone just going, I'm going to buy every damn dip and until I'm dipped out. And then they're like, where's all my money? So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, looking at the comments, I was a bit worried that question leading us away as it did from crypto was was maybe not going to go down well with the audience. They are absolutely loving Ben talking about nuclear energy.
Yeah,
There's so many comments just saying how much they were enjoying that. I thought it was absolutely fascinating. I don't know about everyone watching, but I could happily listen to Ben talk about nuclear energy all day long. I think that's so interesting. And it just, as you say, Ben, like, it opens up just so many possibilities, and we seem to have gotten, there was that point, I think it was towards the end of last year, after everyone was in just a terrible state of mind because of what had happened with FTX. And then I think it was December, we had that news that they had actually, a team in the US had actually achieved nuclear fusion, as you said, albeit for a very short period of time. And it produced a very small amount of energy relative to what was put in. But I remember reading at the time, it's like, that was nonetheless a really big breakthrough. Like, they did prove that it could be done. Obviously, the big challenge the next big challenge is going to be, how do you do that at scale? Right. But still, the fact that they managed to do it, and I remember that was a really big moment. And it seemed to me that media outlets were actually sort of really talking that up as like, this could be a potential turning point. It's not like we're going to have nuclear fusion for all tomorrow, and we're all going to be able to keep our, we're all going to be able to fire up our Bitcoin miners and just get on with it. But it did really seem like we've actually, genuine progress has been made on that, and it was one of the sort of good news stories of last year, I think. So maybe we're not as far off as we were. Maybe it's only sort of going to be 10 years in the future now, rather than always 20 years, perhaps.
It'll be 10 years in the future for the next 50 years. Yeah, no, I mean, look, it was a great progress, and that's what we want to see. Right, or at least we're going in the right direction, right? It's going in the right direction.
Yeah,
let's hope so.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, that's fantastic. People have, like I say, people have really enjoyed hearing Ben talk about that. Patchcorn Adams has wanted to hear Ben talk about nuclear energy for so long. So, I mean, is this next week's stream topic sorted? Shall Rob and I just join the stream and fire questions at Ben about nuclear energy and the possibility of future fusion, and just wind him up and let him go?
Yeah.
Actually, all these a lot of those textbooks over there are all nuclear engineering grad textbooks. There's that and my wife's textbooks from nursing and midwifery and that kind of stuff. So it's a nice eclectic mix of textbooks.
Very nice. See, leaders are readers.
There's a lot of knowledge in that room, and not just in Ben's head. And of course, a few
smart one. She's a smart one.
Yeah, perfect, Ben. Perfect response right there.
It's not.
That's what I say about my wife.
Yeah. My wife is definitely the smart one in my house. Yeah, and of course, a few people pointing out that Ben talking about nuclear energy makes a change from Ben talking about Bitcoin dominance or alts bleeding for the next few months, which as interesting as that always is, I think people like the change at any rate. So we have got a few. Ben for president of the world was
President of the world.
comment.
I don't know if that exists, but it sounds good.
Love this masterclass on nuclear energy. Ben is a very clever man. Someone was suggesting Ben to go on Joe Rogan. I'd listen to that episode.
I'd listen to
sure.
that. That'd be good.
Yeah. Joe, I know you're watching. I know Joe Rogan's a big fan of NFA Live. Never misses it. So Joe, there's your next guest, Mr. Benjamin Cowan. Get him on and talk about nuclear energy. Now there were a couple of crypto related questions as well, so I shouldn't just put up all the nice comments about Ben, lovely as they are. Now someone was asking about. Let me just find it here if I can. Frukimomo 98, DCA from these prices or wait for a recession and take advantage. Obviously, this is not financial advice, and you won't get any of that here, Frukimomo 98. But Rob, I know you're the DCA man. Have you got any non-financial advice to offer regarding that question?
Yeah, like we did a long video yesterday where we took a look at the last 4 recessions. And if you take a look, and everybody talks about from pivot to recession, we took a look at from pause to recession over the last 4 cycles from the 90s, the Great Recession, and the most recent one. And we take a look at like from when we paused, because we paused in July or September of this year. From a pause to recession, it's the last 4 were 18 months, 10 months, a year and 2 months, and then like a very small amount. So we just said, let's just take from the pause to an actual recession about a year and 2 months or so. So what that means is if we pause back in July, August, somewhere around there, then the next recession, if it does happen, I always thought it was going to be Q1 2024, but it looks like it could be Q3 moving forward. So if we take a look and extrapolate that data from Q3, that means that of course, recessions last on average 10 months. We take a look at the last 14 recessions or 12 recessions. That would bring us into May of 2025. And I said, if that happens, so we would have a recession when there was actually a Bitcoin halving in April 2024. We would go into the future, and then we'd have that hopefully blow off top bull run. So what does that mean? That means that all these things that we've been talking about may be incorrect. So for me, like I think I should say that the next halving is when everything happens, right? April 2024. So if you don't want a DCA, you're probably going to miss the bottom. That's okay, because you can take Ben's advice and just go, you know what? I'll wait till liquidity comes in, wait to see what happens with the Fed, if they're going to be higher for longer, and DCA there. Me personally, I'm just DCAing essentially my portfolio is 75% Bitcoin, 10% Ethereum, and the rest are alts. So I will continue to DCA because I have a high risk tolerance. If you do not have that, you're like, you know what? I can lump sum, I can do those things. Then just wait a little bit, because we all know if we take a look at the yield curve, recession's coming. We don't know when it is. Q1 to Q3 are like, JP Morgan end of this year. So for me, I'm just going to keep dollar cost averaging. That's my plan. And then when we hit the blow off top in 2025 or 2026, and we look at those indicators, then of course I can take off or offload some of those profits.
I think as I've said, right, like, so the only thing I bought in crypto the last 2 years was Bitcoin. I bought some, in the second half of last year, but I like DCAing Bitcoin can often work out, right? Because like even if there is a recession, and Bitcoin goes down into a recession, it would still likely recover out of it, without like it would likely recover out of it at some point. The issue is that when you say DCA at these prices, it means like, what are you talking about? Like, are you talking about Bitcoin? Are you talking about the altcoin market, right? Again, the issue with the altcoin market is, a lot of them never recover, right? They just don't. And people keep saying, just you wait, just you wait, my altcoin's going to come back. And I'm like, you said that last year too, and it's down 80% since then. So I think with DCA, it depends on what you're talking about. I think you can make a case for Bitcoin, but I don't even know that you can make a compelling case for Ethereum, because Ethereum just keeps bleeding against Bitcoin itself. I mean, what has Ethereum done this entire year? It's just gone down against Bitcoin, and it's higher risk. And by the way, ever since the merge, the Ether Bitcoin valuation, it just keeps going. It just keeps putting in lower highs. So there's this idea out here that we don't fully understand, how the market is going to react to this. I think everyone just assumes it's macro bullish, but if that were the case, why has it been bleeding since the merge?
Yeah, and then real quick, just to copy off of what Ben, or to pile on what Ben talked about as far as like not coming back. If we took a look at this from 2017 to 2021, from the ones that hit all-time highs in 2017 to 4 years later, it was only 11 out of the top 53. That's like 20%. So if you think that your altcoin's going to come back, it might not. And history shows that it's pretty risky tumbling down past Bitcoin.
Right. Well, the way to think about it, Rob, too, is that like, if the altcoins go to new highs, it's only because Bitcoin went to new highs first, right? True. Like, so, you're likely not going to see like the altcoin market putting in a new high if Bitcoin's still hanging out at like 25K or 30K. If Bitcoin's at 100K, then all right, then Ethereum might be able to go put a new high. But every cycle, Bitcoin tends to be the first one to put in new highs out of the major market cap coins. Like Ethereum, when Bitcoin when Bitcoin broke 20K last cycle, Ethereum was at like $700. It's just people don't recognize how quickly Ethereum moved after Bitcoin put a new high. Ethereum is often the last one to make its move to the upside. It's also usually the last one to make the move to the downside, which I think is happening right now.
Ooh, yeah, and of course, Bitcoin's the safest one, the most volatile market. There's just these massive gains being made in altcoins, but it's super risky. And I think that's what people have to understand. When you hear like people say, just buy every dip, might not happen. Might actually come back. That's the truth.
Wise words, gents. Wise words. Are you guys all right? We're getting very near the top of the hour, but there are tons of questions actually this week. Do you guys have time for one more? Is that cool?
Yeah, good.
So this one was from Tom Williams. Great show, guys. Thank you very much. Do you think the next bull run will be the last bull run for retail? This reminds me of something that Simon Dixon has said in the past, and that's he very much feels that the bull run still ahead of us could very much very, very well be an absolute monster. But after that, he feels that there's a good chance that Bitcoin might get, in his words, quite boring. Is this something that you guys have thought on at all? Could the next bull run be the last one for retail, and after that, it's not only does the market become less volatile and therefore less fun, I guess, but also perhaps maybe it'll become much more of an institutional asset. Any thoughts on that?
Like, there's always going to be bull run. There's always going to be bull markets and bear markets. There's always going to be money to be made, money to lose. I remember in 2018 people saying that was the last bull market, right? The 2017 bull market was.
I remember that.
And I'm sure you guys remember that too. And everyone was like, you'll never be able to make 100x or 50x on altcoins ever again. And then look what happened, right? I mean, like, the Fed prints a few $1 trillion and the altcoin market goes up again. And I know it seems crazy, but they'll print again one day because that's what they do. And I mean, that's sort of the bull case for Bitcoin in the end, is that the printing will continue, and Bitcoin provides sort of like a relative safe haven. But I don't think that there's always going to be bull markets. There's always going to be bear markets. It's just, I think we have, and honestly, bull markets, there tends to be a lot longer bull markets than bear markets. And if you look at the S&P, it tends to go up. It doesn't tend to go down, right? So like, if you look at a Bitcoin chart, it tends to go up. It doesn't tend to go down. So not only could you argue that we're still going to have bull markets, you could say that we're probably going to be in bull markets more often than we'll be in bear markets.
Oh yeah, and then, but I will say this: I think this is the last unregulated bull market. I mean, there's regulation right now, but I think moving forward, we'll get the spot ETF at some point. It's not a question of when, it's or if, it's when. And then we'll probably get a little bit more clarity. And of course, Congress is already weighing in, the White House is already weighing in. But again, yeah, bull runs and bear runs, it's a natural cycle, just like recessions and non-recessions.
Right.
Yeah.
And by the way, if a recession happens, I mean, all that really means is liquidity is about to come back, right? That's normally the time to buy altcoins, is in the recession, that's not something to fear. that's something to if it happens, like that's a huge opportunity. I think about the opportunity that the recession in 2020 provided for everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine if we get another one that lasts a bit longer. It just means you can buy stuff cheaper for longer, right? When when Powell says higher for longer, he's just talking about the dominance.
And on that note, that's a good one.
Beautifully done. Mic drop from Ben there. Fantastic. Thank you, guys. That was a great stream. Still lots of comments. Ben, they want you to talk about chess next week as well. I love this one as well. Someone posted bottom indicator when crypto YouTubers don't want to talk about crypto anymore. I didn't. I did think anyone joining the stream, sort of, whilst in the middle of that discussion about nuclear fusion, would have gone, "Hang on a sec,
What the hell?
What's happened to all the
here?
crypto?" Yeah, have they pivoted? So guys, that was a really enjoyable stream. Thank you for giving everyone your thoughts on all of that. Next week, I think we're on. Is it Ben's channel?
Yep, on my channel next week.
Great.
Next week we'll be on Ben's channel. The subjects will be nuclear fusion and the best opening gambits in chess. And Rob and I will just poke Ben with questions about all of those, and maybe some Bitcoin dominance as well. Who knows?
Who knows?
But yes, everyone watching, thank you for joining the stream today. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to both Rob and Ben's channels. Ben is on Into the Cryptoverse and Rob is Digital Asset News. Follow them on YouTube and Twitter. There'll be links in the description. And as I said, we will be back next week on Ben's channel, Into the Cryptoverse. So Rob, Ben, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
See you guys.
Thanks, guys. See you all next week.